May every heart be filled with love, joy, and unending happiness this moment. That hears this tale finds comfort, and may love always triumph over suffering. Wishing that the journeys we take will be filled with faith, hope, and the kind of love that can heal all wounds. May the bonds we treasure endure forever. Break, and may the beauty of the present never prevent us from embracing the past. May every person who is watching this video be surrounded by the love they deserve, and may our hearts always find their way home. Hello, my dear viewers. First of all, I want to extend my sincerely grateful to each and every one of you for your love and support during my most recent story. Read all your beautiful comments, and let me tell you, your feedback means the world to me, every word, every thought, and I am motivated to express myself even more passionately, emotionally, and breathtaking love stories to life. Now I have a little request for you as you watch today's story. Make sure to tell me in the comments which moment touched your heart the most, which scene made you feel the deepest emotions. I can't wait to read your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the, if you haven't already, notification bell to ensure that you never miss another heartfelt, soul-warming love story. Your support keeps this journey going, so let's get started on the story for today. One filled with love, passion, and the kind of emotions that stay with you forever. The Grand Whitmore estate was stunning evidence of wealth and power. The prestige crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow. Glow over the grand hall, where hundreds of guests whispered into champagne flutes with their attention fixed on the man standing at the altar. William Whitmore, the formidable and ruthless CEO. His sharp jaw clenched as he stood tall in his black suit, perfectly tailored. Dark eyes void of emotion, he was the image of perfection, cold, untouchable, and completely uninterested in the woman in an exquisite dress who was standing across from him. Ivory wedding dress. As she held her bouquet, Tina's hands slightly shook, heart pounding against her rib cage. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Every girl dreamed of a wedding like this, grandiose elegance that was full of magic and romance. But for her, it was nothing more than a transaction. She was forced into a marriage by their families. Had anticipated that, she told herself, and she would accept this fate. Standing here now in front of the man she was about to marry, she felt the bitter sting of reality settle deep in her chest. William barely spared her a glance. His expression was unreadable, his gaze distant. He wasn't here for love. He ceased to believe in love. He had once been a man of deep love who had fallen in love with a woman he believed to be his forever. But sin had shown him wrong, and she had broken him. Betrayed him in the worst way possible, leaving behind nothing but a man who no longer trusted emotions, who saw love as nothing more than a cruel illusion. The priest's voice echoed in the grand hall. However, William's mind was clouded with resentment due to the weight of a past that refused to. He only focused on letting go when he sensed Tina's delicate fingers slipping into his. And when he realized there was no going back, he put the ring on her. Slender finger, the cold metal, a stark contrast to the warmth of her skin, he expected to feel nothing but a strange sensation. For a moment rippled through him, something he didn't understand and didn't want to acknowledge. "You may kiss the bride," the priest announced. Tina's breath hitched her gaze, searching his. But William didn't move. He didn't lean in. He didn't soften instead. Instead, he bent slightly, barely brushing. His kiss on her cheek before he pulled away was merely a nameless one. A mere formality, and the humiliation burned deep in Tina's chest. The guests haughtily clapped. But the whispers in the crowd were so loud as they walked down the aisle. Despite being miles apart, Tina was forced to smile because she had anticipated his coldness. Yet she hadn't realized just how much it would hurt the grand. Despite the extravagant reception that followed the ceremony, William barely spoke a word to her. He entertained business associates clink. Tina sat quietly at the table, wearing glasses with powerful men and acting as though she wasn't even there. She was listening to the guests talk about their marriage, her fingers clinging to her champagne glass. "She's beautiful, but do you think she can melt his icy heart? He's never gotten over this. Even if he doesn't love her, marriage won't change the fact that she's lucky to have him." Her, the words cut deep, but she remained composed. She wouldn't break, not in front of them, when the reception finally ended. They were whisked away to their new home, a grand, luxurious I-use mansion that now belonged to both of them. Yet as they stepped inside, it became clear this was not a home. It was a palace of ice cold and unwelcoming. Tina hesitated at the door, observing William loosening his grip, his tie, and poured himself a drink. But there was a lot of silence between them. She finally spoke, her voice soft and unsure, suffocating William. "Even though I know you didn't want this marriage, I hope we can at least be civil." As he turned to face her, he exhaled strongly, his jaw tightening. His expression was uninterested, and his dark eyes were hard to see. "Let's not act like Tina. Know why this happened? I don't do love, and I don't do fairy tales. Live your life and I'll live mine." His tone was clipped, leaving no room for negotiation. Her heart twisted painfully, but she refused to let him see it. Instead, she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper, fine, without another word. She turned away, making her way up the grand staircase, her fingers clutching the soft silk of her gown. But as she ascended, she felt his gaze lingering on her, something dark and unreadable, flickering in his eyes. He didn't want this marriage yet. That evening, Tina sat on the edge of and he couldn't seem to look away from her. Massive bed in her new room, staring at the empty space beside her. This wasn't how marriage was supposed to work. She had never anticipated that he would love her, but she had hoped for something, at least respect. But William had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her. She ran her fingers along the wedding ring on her finger, her heart heavy. If she was to be his wife, she would not fade into the background. She would not allow him to push her into the shadows, and she would establish a place for herself. For herself in his world, even if it meant squeezing through the barriers he directed to keep her out. Heart, as she lay down, staring at the ceiling. She made a silent vow she would not beg for his love, but she would make him see her and convince him that she wasn't just a duty, as Little did. They both know fate had other plans, and soon one passionate night would change everything forever. The morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the extraordinary mansion, illuminating Tina's extravagant bedroom. Her heart felt heavy as she stared at the intricate ceiling patterns. Stiff from the restless night, she had barely slept, her mind replaying William's cold words over and over again. "I don't do love and I don't do fairy tales." His piercing voice had pierced her like a knife. But she was still as wanted to pretend it didn't matter. It did. She had married a man who wanted nothing to do with her, from a man who saw her as nothing more than an unwanted obligation. But she couldn't ignore the dark something else that flickered in his eye last night. Conflicted something that made her wonder if deep down William was fighting emotions he didn't want to recognize. The soft knock at the door that distracted her from her thoughts. Hesitant, before she could answer, the door opened, and a maid stepped in, carrying a tray of breakfast. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," she said respectfully, placing the tray on the bedside table. The title made Tina flinch. Mrs. Whitmore was William's wife now, but it didn't feel like it. "That way?" Tina carefully inquired, hoping her question did not sound too eager. The housekeeper paused and shook her head. "Mr. Whitmore left early. Naturally, he attended this morning's business meeting," which Tina should have anticipated. That she forced a smile and nodded as the maid walked away again alone. Tina sighed and pushed the unfinished breakfast she didn't have much of an appetite for away. She got out of bed and entered the walk-in closet instead, tracing her fingers along the rows of opulent gowns that had been meticulously arranged for her. Was expensive, tailored to perfection, yet none of it felt like hers. They were just another way to remind her of the world she'd been thrust into, one in which love wasn't necessary. By the time she got downstairs, her presence was just tolerated. The house was quiet, and she was the only sound coming from the faint ticking of the grand clock in the hallway. She wandered through the mansion, taking in its cold beauty, the extravagant spires of marble, chandeliers, the flawless furniture, all perfect, all lifeless, just like her marriage. As she walked by the study, her eyes fell on a picture that was framed on the grand oak desk. Was old and a little dusty, but looking at it hurt. Through her chest, it was a picture of William with sin. Tina swallowed the lump in her throat, reaching out hesitantly. She could see that the woman in the picture was stunning, with dark eyes and a confident smile. Why William had fallen for her, but he hadn't just fallen, he had been destroyed by her. The pain of betrayal still clung to him, poisoning his heart, making him push Tina away. Before she even had a chance, her fingers curled into her fist. Would William ever look at her if she lived in the shadow of sin for the rest of her life? Really look at her and see her not just the woman he had been forced to marry? Tina had no idea, but she did know that she was not going to spend her money. Life avoiding his past because she deserved to be seen. More that evening, as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, the soft glow of the chandeliers cast long shadows across the vast dining hall. Tina sat at the long table, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her wineglass. The dinner before her remained. William had returned hours earlier, leaving the thick, suffocating silence unbroken. Previously, when he was sitting across from her and dressed in a crisp black suit, his posture rigid, his expression unintelligible. "How was your meeting?" she finally asked, carefully and subtly, and he didn't just look up. Tina's grip on her fork was broken by precision, cutting into his steak. William tightened his grip, asking, "Are we going to live like this forever?" His hands were briefly still. A split second before he put his tools down, he turned his gaze to hers. Just like she spoke softly, almost as if she were a stranger, almost vulnerable. "And we don't have to love that. Each other. I know you didn't want to get married, but we can at least try to something, anything." William studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes betraying nothing. Then with a slow exhale, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers threading. "Together, you don't get Tina." His voice was calm and almost distant. "And I can't understand. Give you Tina's breath if you want it. And what do you think I want?" His eyes darkened. "Love, affection, a husband who..." "Adore you, I can't be that man." Pain twisted in her chest, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she lifted her chin, meeting his gaze head-on. "Maybe you could be if you let yourself a flicker of something pass through his eyes. Something unspoken, but he quickly masked it. "You're wasting your time." He stood his chair scraping against the ground. "I won't change Tina." And then he left, leaving her to sit alone at the empty table with her heart hurting from the silence. Words. Tina did not weep that night. Wallow instead, she stood in front of the grand mirror in her bedroom, studying her own reflection. She knew she was beautiful, but beauty was not enough to Thor Williams' frozen heart. No, she needed more. She needed to make him see her, to make him feel something. She slowly moved her fingers to her nightgown's silk straps, sliding them down her shoulders, the delicate fabric being pulled at her feet, leaving her bare under the soft glow of the chandelier. She turned, glancing toward the door that led to William's room. He was close, he was always close, and yet he was still so far away. A slow, determined breath left her lips. If William wanted to keep his distance, if he wanted to pretend he felt nothing, then she would make him break first. She would make him want her, crave her, need her, because no matter how much he tried to deny it, she had seen the way his eyes stayed with her when he thought she wasn't looking. And Tina knew one thing for sure. William Whitmore would eventually lose control, and when he did, would never be able to let her go. The night was thick with silence. The grand Whitmore mansion bathed in moonlight as Tina stood in front of the mirror, her heart pounding, her resolve unshaken. She had spent the past few days watching William, analyzing him, remembering how he clenched his fingers around his glass and clenched his jaw whenever their eyes met. She walked into the room the way his eyes burned with something dark, something dangerous, something he refused to acknowledge. He was holding himself back, gripping onto his icy exterior like a lifeline. But Tina had seen the cracks, and tonight she would shatter them. Her hands moved with purpose, sliding over her smooth skin, adjusting the silk nightgown that clung to her curves, like a second skin. It was soft, delicate, yet sinfully revealing thin straps that barely held the fabric in place. The neckline dipping scandalously low, the hem brushing just above her thighs. It was something designed to tempt, to seduce, and that was exactly what she intended to do. Tina stepped forward her. She moved silently with her bare feet against the marble floors toward the door that separated their rooms. Ridiculous, really, that even though they were married, they lived like strangers, their bedrooms divided like an invisible wall that neither of them dared to cross. However, she decided that tonight she would not wait for him to come to her. To let him see her, she pushed open the door and entered without hesitation. William's room was dark, and the only light there was light coming from the flickering cityscape. Beyond the towering windows, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, his broad shoulders tense. His tie loosened, his shirt slightly unbuttoned as if he had finally run out of energy, and the amber liquid in his whiskey still sat unopened on the nightstand. The dim glow of the city lights, he didn't move when she entered, didn't even acknowledge her presence, but she could feel it in the air, the sudden realization that he was aware of her. Tina took another step as the room became still, as his fingers curled slightly against his thigh. As she got closer to him, the whispering of her nightgown's silk against her skin. "William," she murmured, her voice soft, yet steady, her fingers brushing against the under her touch, tensing the sleeve of his shirt and slightly turning his head. His dark eyes locking onto hers, they were unreadable, guarded, but beneath that icy exterior, she observed that flicker of hunger's heat in Tina. He warned with his voice dangerously low, rough as gravel. "Return to your room," she tilted, her head, her lips curving into a small knowing smile. "No." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Don't play games with me." She moved in closer, putting herself in between us. Her body was so close to his knees that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Her fingers trailed slowly up his forearm. Jokingly claiming that I was playing with his breath, it was subtle, but she saw it, and after receiving the necessary boost, she leaned in. "You don't want me to leave William's hands, don't you?" Her lips whispered away from his ear, shot up, grabbed her by the hips and held her there, his fingers digging into her skin like he was fighting some invisible struggle going on inside of him. His grip was firm and possessive, but he didn't pull. "Tina," he growled, his voice straining, as if he were holding himself back from her closer. "His control is slipping, and it's not wrong." She cut her fingers as she moved her hand up, to his chest, hearing the rapid beat of his heart. "William is married, or I haven't forgotten that his darkened eyes left his control hanging by a thread." "Forgotten," she smiled, slow and seductive, her fingers tracing the exposed skin of his collarbone, her lips brushing against the sharp edge of his jaw. "Then stop pretending you don't want." After this, the dam suddenly burst, and he uttered a sharp curse. And before she could react, he was lowering her onto his lap, gripping her waist with his hands and crashing his lips against hers with a desperation that stole her breath away. It wasn't gentle. It was unrestrained and possessive in the raw. As he ate her like he was starving, she gasped against his mouth with her fingers tangled in his hair. Because of this, his hands moved over her curves, pressing closer to her. She was pressed so tightly against him that there was no room for them. "Tina," he groaned against her lips, his voice filled with something unspoken, something he wasn't ready to admit, but she could feel it without words. Like a man who had been without warmth for far too long, he touched her and kissed her in that way. Hands moved to the buttons of his shirt, slipping them open one by one, revealing, under her nails, hard sculpted muscles rubbed lightly against his skin, creating a low growl from his throat, his grip on her tightening. "You're playing with fire." She met his gaze, her lips curving into a smirk. "Then," he warned, his breath ragged, "burn me." That was all it took. In one swift motion, he flipped her onto the bed. His lips trailed down her, his body hovering over hers, his eyes burning with something sinister and uncontrollable. Neck, igniting a fire trail in their wake. His hands searched every inch of she and William Whitmore. The icy, untouchable CEO were gone at that point. He was hers and in control, and he would never be able to resist her again. The night had been wild, untamed, and full of raw passion, a collision of emotions. As dawn broke, a soft, golden glow spread throughout the area, which neither of them could stop. Tina awoke as the entangled bodies on the vast bed were illuminated by the curtains. First, her bare skin still tingling from William's fevered touch, her heartbeat still unsteady from the intensity of she sat there for a brief moment, taking in the events that had transpired between them. Because of it, her husband, the man who had repeatedly resisted her, was now hers. or was it he? She slightly turned her head, focusing on William. Chiseled form beside her, his muscular arm was draped over her waist, his body. His eyes were still closed, and his breathing was steady and slow. Unreadable in the daylight, was now relaxed, his lashes dark against his skin. He looked different, like this, almost vulnerable. But she knew better. William Whitmore did not do vulnerability. What had happened last night was not just passion, it was him losing control, something he had sworn he would never do. She tentatively traced his abdomen's distinct ridges with her fingers, retaining the warmth of his skin against hers and the feel of him. But the moment was William's eyes briefly opened, as if sensing her gaze. They were dark and unreadable for a moment. Neither of them moved, neither of them spoke then. Before she could say a word, he moved away from her warmth and stood up. He was retreating, his back to her, at the edge of the bed. Tina's heart clenched. She sat up slowly, clutching the sheets to her chest, watching the tense line of his shoulders, the way his hands ran through his thick hair, as if trying to compose himself. The air between them William's voice was soft and heavy-laden, full of unspoken words. Hesitant, he didn't turn around. This shouldn't have happened, and Tina swallowed hard, the coldness in his voice like a slap. You don't mean that? He sharply exhaled while standing up and reaching for the discarded, do you? When he finally turned to face her, he was wearing his robe on a nearby chair. His expression was unreadable, his eyes again guarded. I lie, she observed, his clenched hands at his sides. His chest rose and fell with barely restrained emotion. But he was fighting it, pushing it down, retreating into the icy fortress he had built around himself. Tina refused to let him. She stood, letting the silk sheet slip from her body, standing before him, with nothing but raw confidence and the remnants of their passion marking her skin. His eyes flickered just for a second, but it was enough. You don't regret last night, she said, taking a step closer. His jaw tightened. Tina, don't. Don't what? She challenged, tilting her head. Don't remind you that you wanted me, that you still want me. She placed her hand on his bare chest. William's hands were around her, and you could feel the rapid thump of his heart beneath her. Wrist tight, but he didn't push her away. Instead, he bobbed his throat as he swallowed hard. I told you before, I can't give you what you want. Tina searched his. What do you think I want his grip on when I see the war raging within him? Love a husband, who was what she pressed, and he exhaled as her wrist loosened. I'm not that man, stepping back to create distance between them. Tina felt a pain in her chest, but she didn't show it. Rather, she lifted her chin, forcing a small, knowing smile. Maybe not yet. His gaze darkened his lips, parting as if to argue. But before he could say another word, a sharp knock echoed through the door. Shattering the moment, William's expression hardened instantly. Slipping back into the cold, controlled CEO persona, he reached for his robe, loosely tying it around his waist before he walked toward the door. Tina watched him go, a quiet determination settling in her chest. This was not over. He had the option of fleeing or hiding behind his walls, but she had felt it, the way he had touched her, the way he had whispered her name in the dark, the way his body had sought hers, even in sleep. William Whitmore was a man at war with himself, and Tina was going to win later that day. The day passed in a blur of meetings and business calls. William buried himself in work, ignoring the lingering scent of Tina on his skin. He had spent the morning attempting to persuade her, but the ghost of her touch was still burning him in places he had no right to remember. Himself, that last night had been a mistake, that he had merely given in to nothing more than temptation. But that was a lie, because the truth was that he was obsessed with her. His control had snapped the moment she had stepped into his room, looking like a goddess sent to test his every resolve. He had wanted her for so long. But last night had altered everything, and he could not stop thinking about her. Replaying the way she had felt beneath him, the way she had moaned his name, the way she had clung to him as if he was the only thing that mattered in the world, and that terrified him. He had sworn never to let another woman get close, not after what sin had done to him. He had built walls, perfected the art of indifference, but Tina was tearing through them, breaking him down and making him feel things he didn't need to feel. Space required control, but as soon as he entered his mansion, that evening, all sense of control shattered in an instant. Tina stood in the middle of the grand living room, with her hair cascading over her shoulders, in a dress that hugged her body in ways that made his mouth dry. Shoulders in soft waves, her lips painted a deep shade of red, her eyes locking onto his with quiet confidence. "Welcome home, husband," she purred, her voice laced with something teasing, something dangerous. His throat tightened. She was testing him, and God help him, he was about to fail. He took slow, deliberate steps toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. "Tina, what are you doing?" She smiled, her fingers trailing up his chest over William's breath, hitched as his tie pulled him closer. "You're not the only one who gets to play games. Tina, tell me you don't want me." She tilted her head, her lips so close to his taste. He looked me in the eyes, lied to me, and fisted his hands at me so that he could taste the temptation in the air. His sides, damn it, Tina. She cut him off with a slow, lingering kiss, her body as it presses flush against his. Her heat submerges him. Her tenderness tears away every last bit of his control, and in a flash he was gone. With a low growl, he grabbed her and lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward the grand staircase without another word. Because no matter how much he tried to fight it, Tina owned him, and tonight he was going to show her just how deep his. When William carried Tina up the grand staircase, the world outside was consumed with obsession. Ceased to exist, it was just them, their heartbeats racing in sync, their breaths uneven, their bodies tuned into a fire. Neither of them could escape, and he held on to her with a grasp that was possessive of his own. Tina could feel the tension coursing through his muscles, as though he were preventing himself from completely out of control, but she wanted him to keep going because she didn't want him to. Surrender to the passion that had been building between them for far too long, to finally let go of whatever ghost forced him to admit that she wanted him just as much as he did. William kicked open the door to his dark master bedroom as they got there. Eyes never leaving hers, he set her down slowly, his hands sliding down her body. His warm touch sent a lingering sensation that was only slightly excessive. She felt a chill through her body, and she looked up at him, looking at his face for any sign of hesitation, any sign that he was going to retreat like he always did. But this time, there was no hesitation, no retreat, just unadulterated pure need, Tina. He murmured, his voice low, almost tortured. She placed a finger against his lips, suppressing any resistance he was about to express. "William." She stopped running. He stopped making excuses, and his eyes flickered. Desire, desperation, surrender. And then, without another word, he crushed his lips against hers, stealing her breath, devouring her as if she was the only thing keeping him alive. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, pressing their bodies together until there was no space left between them. The kiss was grumpy and brimming with all of the feelings he had tried so hard to suppress. Tina melted against him, her fingers pushed against his shirt. Off his shoulders, desperate to feel his skin against hers, he let out a low growl. His bare chest was pressing against the silk of her dress as he shrugged off the fabric, sending a message of contrast. As he gripped her from her waist down, his hand sent a rush of excitement through her. She felt a shudder in her core when he lifted her once more and carried her with a possessiveness. Toward the massive bed that dominated the room, he laid her down gently. His dark, intense gaze hovered over her as his fingers traced the outline of her dress, the sluggish, agonizing movement that caught her breath. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" He rasped, his voice thick with emotion. Tina reached up her fingers, threading through his hair. "Then show me," she whispered. A curse slipped from his lips as he captured her mouth again, this time slower, deeper, as if he was memorizing every taste, every sensation. His hands moved to the straps of her dress, slipping them down her shoulders, his lips following the path of exposed skin. She gasped before arching beneath him and clinging to him with her fingers as William kissed his way down, admiring her for who she was. He was submerged in her warmth and softness, of her skin, the way she responded to his every touch, every kiss. He had spent so long trying to resist this, trying to convince himself that he couldn't allow himself to fall again. But with Tina beneath him, looking at him with nothing but love and desire, fire, all of his walls crumbled. She was undoing him in ways he had never imagined, making him feel things He'd sworn he would never feel again. Tina, he breathed against her skin, his lips brushing over her collarbone, down to the swell of her chest. She CED his face, forcing him to look at her. "You don't have to fight this anymore, William," she said softly. "I'm yours." His chest tightened in response to her words. Heron, for the first time, was his. In years, he allowed himself to believe it. His lips crashed against hers once more. This time, with a desperation that bordered on madness, he needed her. Needed to claim her completely. His hands roamed her body, mapping every curve, each incline, as if it were writing her down in her mind. Tina responded with the same fervor, her hands exploring the hard planes of his back, her nails raking over his skin, drawing a groan from deep within his chest. The room was filled with the sounds of their passion, the rustling of sheets, the soft gasps and moans that escaped Tina's lips. As William worried her, he took his time, savoring every moment, every reaction until she was trembling beneath him, completely undone. And when he finally joined her, claiming her in the most intimate way possible, it was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced. It wasn't just passion, it wasn't just desire, it was something deeper, something unbreakable. It was love, and for the first time, William didn't fight it. He held her close, pressing his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling, their hearts pounding as one Tina. He whispered, his voice roar his. She bared all her feelings as she smiled at him while tracing his lips with her fingers. William's jaw dropped open in love at her words. At the sheer honesty in her voice, love, it was something he had feared. Something he had convinced himself he no longer believed in. But as he looked into Tina's, he saw with his own eyes that he had already fallen, and there was no going back. He cooed her face back, kissing her so tenderly that he ran his lips over hers. Reverent enough to make her tremble, he murmured, "You're mine," against her mouth, "and I'm never letting you go." Tina's smile widened as she rapped. She wraps her arms around him, holding him close. But then she doesn't, and that night, as they lay together, William was entwined with their souls and bodies beneath the sheets. Whitmore came to terms with what he had previously been unable to see. Just addicted to Tina, he needed her, and he would spend the rest of his life. The golden light cast by the morning sun through the curtains proved it. Light up the bed where two bodies were lying entwined after a night died, that had rewritten the very foundation of their relationship. Tina stirred first, her body still humming with the remnants of William's. Touch her heart beating in a slow, satisfied rhythm. She lowered her head, focusing on the man next to her. A man who was once distant, cold, and untouchable, but now lay next to her, with his arm draped possessively over her waist. His face relaxed in sleep, as if the war inside him had finally quieted. She reached out tentatively, her fingers grazing the sharp angles of his jaw, tracing the faint shadow of stubble that had formed overnight. He was breathtaking in the morning light. His dark hair tousled his lips slightly, parted his entire presence, exuding a raw masculinity that sent a familiar warmth spreading through her. But more than that, he looked at peace, and that was something Tina had never seen on him before. For last night had changed everything she had experienced, from the way he touched her, to the way he called her like a prayer, to the way he whispered her name. He gave in to the feelings he had tried so hard to keep hidden. Been more than just a passion, it was love. Whether William was ready to admit it or not, she knew it was there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for recognition. She felt hope for the first time since their marriage, not just for herself, but for the future they could create together. Her hands trailed down the firm. His chest ridges felt his breath steady rise and fall. But just as Tina gasped softly as Williams, just as she was about to pull away, her wrist being restrained by a firm hand. As they locked onto hers, their dark, intense eyes fluttered open. His grip on her wrist was firm but gentle, and he didn't notice his thumb moving in slow, deliberate circles over her pulse. At first, he just stared at her, with a face that was hard to read, as if he were trying to figure out what emotions were going through his body. She whispered a small word as she looked at you now that you were awake. Smile playing on her lips. His fingers tightened slightly around her wrist before he brought it to his lips, kissing her palm for a long time. "I've been awake for a while." He, "I was watching you," he admitted, his voice husky from sleep. Tina's breath caught at his words made her heart skip a beat, which is why William slowly exhaled and his eyes never. "I'm leaving hers because I can't believe what happened last night." Was real. Her heart clenched at the vulnerability in his tone, at the raw honesty he was allowing himself to show. She shifted closer, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "It was real," she murmured, "and it wasn't just one night." William's arms were clenched around him. "And this is real." Her bringing her closer to him, as if he was worried that if he let go, she would vanish. He confessed, his voice barely rising above a Tina. "I don't know how to do this." Whisper, "I don't know how to be the man you deserve." Tina lifted her head, cupping his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "You don't have to be perfect, William. You just have to be you." A muscle ticked in his jaw, his eyes darkening with something she couldn't quite decipher. Then without warning he rolled them over, pinning her beneath him, his body pressing intimately against hers. His fingers brushed over her cheek, trailing down her jaw, over her lips, as if he was memorizing every inch of her. I want this." Tina's eyes," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, softened as she reached up her fingers, threading through his hair. "Then take it. William, take me." His control snapped with. He kissed her hard from low ground, his hands moving over her body and igniting a fire that neither of them had the strength to extinguish. The passion between them was raw, desperate, unrestrained, a reflection of the emotions they had both tried so hard to deny, and as they lost themselves in each, Tina had no doubt whatsoever that William was, once more, hers. Later that day, the mansion was unusually quiet as Tina descended the grand staircase, with William's touch still tingling her body. She had anticipated him to retreat, but her heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. After last night, to come up with a reason to distance them, but instead he had held her, kissed her, wanted her. It was progress, and Tina was determined to hold on to it as she made her way to the dining hall. She was surprised to find William already seated at the table, sipping his morning coffee, dressed in his usual crisp suit. But something was different. His posture was more relaxed, and his gaze was more subdued as it landed on her favorable morning wife, he said, his lips curving into a genuine but insignificant. When he spoke, Tina felt a warmth rise in her chest, and she smiled. Before, his calls had always been formal and distant, and he had never called her that casually. But now it felt different. It felt real. "Good morning, husband," she teased, moving to take the seat beside him. He watched her closely as she poured herself a cup of tea, his fingers tapping against the table in a slow, rhythmic pattern. She could feel how heavy his gaze was on her and how intense his eyes were, making her skin tingle. She raised an eyebrow and said, "You're staring." "William, I can't help it. My wife is breathtaking in the morning." Tina's smirking as he leans back in his chair. She didn't look away despite her flushed cheeks. "You're quite the charmer today, Mr. Whitmore." His expression shifted, turning more serious. "Maybe it's because, for the first time in a long time, I feel free to pretend." Tina's breath hitched. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Then don't just be with me." William's grip was firm and reassuring, his fingers curled around hers. "Tina, I really am trying." She realized then that he meant it when he said it to them, not just Daye. Although their love story was far from over, Tina was unaware that it could be written together for the first time. Feel like this intoxicating, overwhelming, consuming her every thought and breath. William held her last night, whispered her name against her skin, and worshipped everything with his lips. Inch of her body, it was as if he had finally accepted the truth he had been running from. And now, as she lay against his naked chest, she was paying attention to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She realized something. She had fallen far too deeply, and there was no turning back. The morning sun streamed through the windows, bathing the. In the dimly lit room, William had one arm around her, still holding on, possessive even in sleep, His other hand rested over hers on his chest, as if even in his dreams he didn't want to let go. The sight of him so peaceful, so unguarded made Tina smile. She had seen so many sides of him, the cold CEO, the man burdened by betrayal, the passionate lover who had set her body and soul on fire. But this side of him, the one who held her like she was the most precious thing in his world, was the one she loved most carefully. She lifted her hand and brushed her fingers against his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her touch, his stubble rough, a stark contrast to the way his lips were soft, as if he were sensing her gaze. His eyes fluttered open in the moment his dark, intense stare met hers. Tina's breath caught in her throat. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. William didn't respond at first. He simply watched her. His gaze he rolled onto his side in a single swift motion, unreadable but burning with something she couldn't quite identify. Pulling her beneath him and pressing her into the mattress, the air between them changed and became more and more saturated with unspoken words, unfulfilled desires. His fingers traced the curve of her jaw, dropped to her lips, and his touch was light but sufficient to send her shivering. "Through her, I like waking up next to you," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. Tina's heart skipped a beat before he continued to smirk as a smile tugged at his lips. "But you don't understand," he murmured. There was something else in his gaze now, something darker and more possessive. Lowering his head until just above her lips, he said, "You've ruined me, Tina. Can't get enough of you." Her excitement at the confession made her wrap her arms around his shoulders. "Then don't fight it," she whispered, and his chest growled. And then he kissed her, deep, hungry, desperate. It appeared as though he was trying to consume her, to let her know his hands moved over her, and she belonged to him just as much as he belonged to her. Her bare skin setting fire to every nerve, making her arch against him. She gasped as his lips left hers trailing, even more desperate to have him all to herself. Across her collarbone, lower down, and his fingers examined her body with a tenderness that contradicted the urgency in his touch, as if he was memorizing every curve, every reaction. And when he finally claimed her once more, it took a long time and was intense. A reiteration of he held her close, pressing his lips to her temple, and his warm breath reflected everything that had changed between them since then. Against her skin, "I'm not letting you go," he murmured, his voice. "Roar, not now, not." "I don't want you," Tina cried every time she closed her eyes. They remained like that for what seemed like hours, ensconced in one another and lost in the afterglow of something far deeper than just passion, but reality had a way of slowly returning. William eventually backed away, sighing as he ran a hand through his hair. "I have meetings today." Clearly dissatisfied by the idea, Tina stood on one elbow as she left her and watched as he got up and reached for his discarded shirt before saying, "Go," she softly added. Part of her wanted to ask him to stay. William turned to her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You say that too easily," she tilted her head. "Would you instead? I beg you to refrain." His jaw clenched, and then quickly movement. He was on top of her again, pinning her wrists to the bed. "Don't tempt me, Mrs. Whitmore," he growled his. A slow smile spread across her lips, or what his eyes saw just inches from hers. "Darkened, or I'll make sure you never leave this bed," his promise. Sent her a delicious shiver, but he sighed and left before she could respond. He promised to be back early tonight, and he kissed her forehead for a long time. Tina nodded, watching as he got dressed. Movement exuding power and confidence. When he finally left the room, she let out a breath. He was already gone. And later that Tina wandered the mansion throughout the day, her thoughts consumed by William. She had never expected to fall so deeply, so irrevocably in love with him. But now she couldn't imagine a life without him. She had seen glimpses of the man he truly was beneath the hardened exterior, and she knew that despite, he only needed to allow himself to feel all the love he was capable of. She passed by William's office. Something caught her attention, a picture frame sitting on his desk, curious. She stepped when she saw the image, a photograph of William. Her heart clenched as she hesitantly reached inside her fingers for it. With her, not his past or sin, but Tina had no idea it was taken at their wedding. He had kept it all along with a small smile. Formed on her lips, maybe she wasn't the only one who had fallen too deeply that. When William got home that evening, Tina was waiting for him. He only had a moment to react before she threw her arms around him. Around him, pressing a fierce kiss to his lips, he froze for only a second before. As a response, he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her toward him. "What's this for?" When they finally broke up, he inquired, and Tina smiled at him for loving me even if you don't realize it. Yet his expression softened, his thumb brushing over her cheek. "I think I'm starting to." And as he kissed her, she recognized that this was just the beginning of something, but this time slower and more deeply. The air between them had changed, and neither of them could ever move away from it. There was no longer hesitation, in fact. Longer weighed down by the ghosts of William's past, it was charged electric, a magnetic force that neither of them could resist, and Tina could feel it in his eyes. In the manner in which he pulled her close, the touch lingered a little longer than was necessary. At night, as if in fear of disappearing, and now as she stands on the balcony of their bedroom, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, she knew that the man who had once resistant to love, everything about him was slowly falling apart beneath it. Power. As the cool night breeze kissed her bare skin, she slightly shivered, and almost instantly she felt his presence behind her, before she could turn. William's arms wrapped around her waist. His warmth covered her, and his breath was hot against her ear. "You ought to be inside," he murmured, his voice laced with concern. "It's cold out here." Tina smiled, leaning back against him. "I was waiting for you." William tightened his grip. "If you hadn't pulled her closer, I would have found you," when she turned in his arms and was tilted. "Head to face him, would you?" His intense dark eyes held hers. Unreadable, but filled with something that made her breath hitch. "Always," he said, and there was no hesitation in his voice, no trace of the cold, distant man he used to be. Her heart pounded as he reached out, tucking a stray strand of head hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and then without warning, he cued her face, his thumb brushing over her lips. Tina's breath caught, anticipation curling in. She whispered William into her stomach, but before she could say anything else, lips crashed against hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was urgent, desperate, filled with all the emotions he had fought so hard to suppress. He kissed her like she was his lifeline, like he'd been longing for her touch and taste as his hands pulled on her body. Her flush against him, and Tina melted into his, embrace, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him back with equal fervor. The world around them disappeared. Nothing else mattered. Only William was the only one of them to effortlessly lift her. Carrying her back into the bedroom, his lips never leaving hers, he laid her down on the bed, his eyes dark with desire as he hovered over her, his fingers tracing slow, torturous patterns along her skin. "You drive me insane," he admitted his. "I don't know how you do this to me, Tina." Your voice is husky and full of raw need. Reaching up, she wrapped his face in her hands and whispered, "Don't fight it." He just let out a low growl, and then he kissed her even more deeply, slower, savoring every moment, every sigh, every shiver. His hands explored her body, setting her skin on fire, making her arch against him, needing more. Needing all of he finally claimed her. There was more than just passion between them. It was love, undeniable, unbreakable. Hours later, Tina lay. She was tangled up in the sheets, her body still humming from his touch, and her heart was full like it had never been before. William lay beside her, his arm draped over her waist, his fingers lazily tracing circles against her skin. She turned her head to look at him, taking in the sight of the man who had once been cold and distant. She asked, now staring at her as if she were his entire world, "What are you thinking?" Softly, William exhaled, his fingers pausing against her skin. "That I never." Tina slightly frowned as she anticipated what he would see when she met his gaze. Expression unreadable, "to fall in love with you." Her breath caught her heart stuttering in her chest. "William, I fought it," he admitted, his voice raw. "I told myself that love was risky because it only brought pain, but then you entered my life, and suddenly nothing made sense anymore." He reached out, brushing his. You changed everything with your fingers on her cheek, Tina. Tears pricked her eyes and she swallowed the lump in her throat. And do you regret it? She asked, her voice barely. His grip on her waist never let go, his voice barely audible as his darkened gaze said with conviction, "If anything, I regret not allowing myself to love you." She shed a tear earlier, but it was not one of sorrow. Rather, it was of, she cued his face, pulling him down for a soft, lingering feeling of overwhelming happiness. "Kiss, William," she whispered, and he sharply inhaled. "I love you." "Say it again," he murmured, his voice almost pleading. Tina smiled, pressing her close with arms around her. "I love you, William," let out a shaky breath as he put his forehead against his. Grip on her tightening, "And I love you, Tina, more than I ever thought possible." They lay together in the quiet of the night, their hearts beating in perfect harmony, and in that moment Tina knew no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what shadows of the past tried to haunt them, she and William were unbreakable. Their love had won. Tina had never known love could feel like this. So consuming, so intense, so utterly irresistible the moment William confessed his love. Something inside her shattered and reformed. Binding her to his words had reverberated in her mind throughout the entire night, even after their passionate leaming had left her breathless and trembling in his arms. "And I love you, Tina, more than I ever thought possible." Those words had unlocked something inside him. Something. It was love in its purest, undiluted form, deeper than mere desire. Past and present as the curtains opened to reveal the first rays of dawn. His face was soft golden hues, and she memorized it by tracing her fingers over his jaw. Every curve, line, and line of his eyelashes as they brushed against his skin as he, when she saw him, this powerful, untouchable man, her heart swelled. Had previously suppressed his feelings, now lying next to her, holding her as if she were the most valuable thing in the world. She had never seen him in this way before. Vulnerable and unguarded, which increased her love for him, she pressed a feather-like kiss to his lips. But before she could pull away, his arms tightened around her, trapping her against his chest. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice was muffled and deep, sleep sending a shiver down her spine. Tina smiled against his lips. William's eyes opened dark and filled with something possessive, "Thinking you were asleep." "How can I sleep when you keep doing something so intense that it made her stomach turn?" As he rolled her onto her back, his fingers trailing down her arm, she tempted me with her warm cheeks, over her ribs, causing her to tremble under his touch. William smirked. His lips brushed against the, she whispered breathlessly. Saying it again, he murmured against her neck's sensitive skin with his hands, mapping her body as though he were learning every detail. William, her voice was nothing more than a moan as his lips moved lower, igniting fire wherever they came into contact, and his hands gripped her waist. His hold was firm but gentle, as though he wanted to worship her, to make her feel their bodies move together in a slow, sensual rhythm, expressing how much he meant to them, breaths mingling their hearts, beating as one. There was no rush, no urgency, only. When they finally lay tangled in each other's arms once more, their love was deep and unbreakable. Their breaths were uneven, and their bodies were filthy from sweat. William pressed his, "I meant what I said," pressing his forehead against hers and his fingers on her cheek. He murmured, "I love you, Tina," and last night, in an emotional tone. She wiped her eyes with tears as she traced his lips with her thumb as she cued his face. "You don't have to," she whispered, "because I'm yours forever." A groan escaped him as he pulled her into another deep, lingering kiss, one that promised endless nights of passion, of love that would never fade. But as despite her desire to spend the entire day with him in bed, reality had other plans for her. Later that morning, as she stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast, she felt William's presence behind her before he even touched her. His arms wrapped around his lips, recognizing the arc of her shoulder, found her waist. "You ought to still be in bed." Tina giggled, tilting her head to the side to allow him better access, because he murmured against her skin. "Make sure you eat," William said with a chuckle. Turning her to face him so I could think of better ways to start my marriage, he said, tracing circles with his fingers. Tina's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at him and noticed how he darkened by William's unspoken assurances. She warned through her voice. Betrayed her filled with anticipation, he leaned in his lips, ghosting over hers. Say my name like that again, and I won't let you leave this kitchen. He growled, a shiver ran down her spine. But before he could claim her lips, a sudden knock on the door interrupted them. William cursed under his breath, his jaw tightening. Whoever it is, they have the worst timing. Tina laughed and played, fully pushed him away before going to the door. But her smile vanished as soon as she opened it. And she stood there looking as Tina was as stunning as ever, and her breath caught her heart. Slamming against her ribs, she had never met William's ex before, had only heard about her betrayal, but now face to face, she could understand why he had fallen in love with her in the past. His beauty was sharp. She had a shield-like face and a sense of self-assurance, but her eyes were cold. I've heard that calculating Tina Wrightson's voice was soft and almost too friendly. Tina forced a polite smile on everything about you, and you must be sin before sin. Could respond. William appeared beside Tina, his expression darkening as soon as he saw her. Tina hadn't heard his voice this sharp and cold in a long time. It's been a while. William can't be an old friend, and Timesin's lips curled into a smirk. Visit to say hello, Williams, whose jaw is clenched, as you and I both know. Here for amusement. What do you want? Sin glanced at Tina before Tina stiffened as she returned to William. I need to talk to you alone. Could react. William pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her waist possessively. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of my wife, he said with conviction. Eyes something almost like regret, but it was gone before Tina could be. I just thought you should know that I made a mistake, she said with a sigh. Leaving you, silence filled the air. Tina's breath hitched as she felt William was tense next to her, but he quickly, yes, you did, and I praise God every day for your grip on Tina. Tightened his G, never leaving Sin's, because if you hadn't, I never would have discovered that the love of my life's smirk lapsed into sin, and for the first time, she gave the impression of being truly surprised. But William pulled closer before she could respond, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead. Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife and I have better things to do. And just like that, he shut the door in Sin's face, turning back to Tina. With she's my past, he murmured, cupping her, with an intensity that made her knees weak. Face in his hands, you're my future. Never doubt that Tina swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded as she wept. Eyes, I love you, she whispered. William's lips crashed against hers, his kiss deep and possessive. And I'll love you until my last breath, he promised, as he lifted her into his arms, carrying her back to their bedroom. Tina knew this love, this passion, this connection between them. It was forever, the moment William closed the door on Sin. Tina felt something. It wasn't just that William brought about a profound and unshakable shift between them. Had rejected his past, it was the way he had done it, without hesitation, without a nary. A doubt that she was the only one he had chosen. And that's when she realized that they could overcome nothing, not even the ghosts of his betrayal. But even as William pulled her into his arms, his lips brushing against her forehead, she couldn't shake the lingering unease. In her chest, the question arose as to why Sin had returned. Was it merely to cause trouble? Or William pulled back, gently cupping her face with his dark hands, so he must have detected an additional source of her tension. Tina, don't let her get into your head by looking into her eyes, he murmured. She's nothing but a mistake I left. But his tone was firm and tender. Behind, Tina swallowed, nodding, though the worry still clung to her like a shadow. I trust you, William, I do. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. But I don't trust her. William's jaw tightened his grip on her waist and said, she doesn't mean anything, this time with a raw amount of intensity. That made her tremble. You're the only woman I want, the only one I'll ever want. His lips descended on hers, claiming her with a desperate passion that left her breathless. Tina melted into him, her fingers tangling in his hair, and carried her effortlessly toward their bedroom. As he lifted her, kicked the door shut behind them, his lips never leaving hers as he laid her down on the bed, his body pressing against hers with a need that was comparable to her own. Allow me to remind you of who you are. His hands moved over her body as he spoke softly to her lips, smoothing her skin. Fire Tina arched beneath him, gasping as he worshipped her, with every touch, every kiss her skin, with every whisper of love. He didn't just take her, he possessed her soul and body, causing her to experience sensations she had never experienced before, and losing themselves in each other. Tina was aware that this was more than their bodies moving in perfect harmony. This was more than just passion. It was deep love that consumed a flame that would never die. Out hours later, she lay tangled in the sheets, her body still humming from his William's presence. There filled her heart in a way it had never been before. His arm draped over her waist, his fingers tracing lazy patterns against her skin. He looked at her with a softness that took her breath away, a tenderness that made her chest ache. "What?" she asked, smiling as she ran her fingers through his dark hair. William exhaled, his gaze never leaving hers. "I still can't believe you're mine," he murmured, putting his thumb on her lips to remind her that I get to hold you every day and wake up with you every morning. Night Tina's heart swelled as she cued his face. "I was always yours, William," she whispered even before you realized it. His eyes darkened, and in one swift, "You know that he rolled on top of her and pinned her beneath him." "You drive me crazy." Tina shivered as she growled, "I don't think I'll ever get enough of you." He kissed her along her jaw and down her neck, tilting her head back as his lips trailed lower. "Then don't stop." She breathed, and just like that, he was lost. Their bodies were entwined once more in her, and their love grew stronger with each hushed moan. By the time the sun came up, they were both yearning for more with each sigh and touch. They finally emerged from their sanctuary, Tina standing in her Williams robe, high in the sky. Her coffee in the kitchen, she felt him before she saw his strong arms. His chin rested on her shoulder as he wrapped his arms around her waist. "I should keep you all in bed." "Day," he murmured as he kissed her on the next curve. Tina giggled, tilting her head. She turned her head to the side, which, as tempting as it may sound, made William giggle, spinning her around so that she was facing him, and his eyes scanned her dim and crowded with. He teased, leaning in until their lips were full of heat. "I can live without food." Tina's breath caught in her hands as they were almost touching. "But I can't live without you." Grabbing his shirt as she looked up at him, she whispered, "Don't, because I'm—" He gave her a kiss without moving, and then slowed down, and deep pouring every emotion into it, making her knees weak. But just as she was about to lose herself once more in him, when William shattered the sound of his phone vibrating on the counter, pulled away just enough to grab the device, groaned in frustration, and his expression changed. Darkened the second he saw the caller ID. Tina frowned. "Who is it?" William exhaled sharply, his jaw clenching. Sent a cold chill ran down Tina's spine, her fingers tightening around the counter. What does she want now? William hesitated for only a second before answering the call, putting it on speaker. "What do you want, Sin?" he asked, his tone cold, detached. There was a pause, then Sin's voice came through softly, but it was tangled with something hard to read. "We have to talk." "William, there's nothing left to talk about," William said firmly. Sin sighed. "It's about the past. There are things you don't know, things I need to tell." Tina's heart pounded as she glanced at William, and his hold on the phone tightened, but his expression remained unreadable. "I don't care about the past," he stated. "You should also move on." "I doubt you'll ever say that." "You hear what I have to say," Sin murmured, and the room fell into tense silence. William's gaze flickered toward Tina, revealing something unsure. At that precise instant, she saw it as a faint doubt, the ghost of his past trying to claw its way forward. When she returned, Tina raised her chin, indicating that whatever she had to say did not matter. She said, her voice unwavering, "We're stronger than that." William exhaled, nodding as he squeezed her hand. "You're right." He turned back to the phone. "Sin, don't call me again, no matter what you say." Before Sin could respond, he ended the call, tossing the phone onto the counter. After that, he turned to Tina, his expression serious, and pulled her close, his hands grabbing her waist. "You're my future," he said, said his voice fierce, unwavering. Not her, not the past. Only as she wrapped her arms around you, Tina's heart grew and she wept, her eyes burning. His neck. William, I love you. His lips found hers, securing his promise with a kiss that made it impossible for the past to get in the way. And as they held each other, wrapped in the warmth of their love, Tina knew no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what shadows tried to creep in, their love was strong enough. Tina stood in the warm embrace of to withstand everything. William's arms feeling the steady thump of his heart beneath her fingertips, the way his breath mingled with hers, his lips lingering on her skin like a chosen promise. She had observed it in his eyes and in the way he held her, and used his hands with her. Never left her body, as if it were impossible to let go of her, even for a moment. And yet, even in the glow of their love, the past still lurked in the corners, whispering, refusing to die the moment he had rejected sin's call. Tina had seen something flicker in his gaze, not regret, not hesitation, but something deeper, as she refused to answer the question, which left a lingering trace of the past. William traced his fingers along the line, refusing to let it dampen the passion that was brewing between them. You're thinking too much, she murmured, her jaw tipped up to meet his gaze. Tina exhaled, raising her hands in the air, as his husky voice sent chills down her spine. Under her touch, he could feel the tension in his muscles in his chest. Hesitated. Unable to express the weight in her chest, she hesitated. Anything from the past to come between us? William's gaze darkened, and his body was firmly pressed against the wall as soon as he had her pinned against it. She won't have anything, he said, his voice growling with possession. Not sin, not the past. Nothing? Tina, do you hear me? Tina's breath hitched as his lips crashed down onto hers, stealing the air from her lungs, devouring her doubts, consuming her in a firestorm of need. She clung to him. As he intensified the kiss, her fingers became entangled in his hair, and his hands gripped her waist, bringing her closer and closer until she could feel every inch, every beat, and every ounce of him until there was no space between them. Desire, I need you, he rasped against her lips, his voice roar with emotion, with desperation. I need you, Tina, only you. Her heart clenched, and she knew there was no past strong enough to break what they... She was his, and he was hers, and no ghost could take him away from her. Hers bound together by something deeper than love, stronger than passion. She swung her arms around his neck, pressing herself against him, and gave in to the love storm that swept over her. The heat of his touch, the fire that burned between them. William lifted her into his arms, carrying her to the bed, with a hunger that sent electricity sing through her veins. He laid her down gently, his gaze locking with hers, dark and intense. Let me love you, he whispered, his pushing her dress aside as her fingers traced along its edge, revealing her inch by inch. Skin, Tina shivered under his touch, her body already aching for him, her heart, she breathed. And then he was, already lost in him, always. On her, his lips shooting fire down her back, his hands exploring every inch of her, as if they had memorized her, worshiping her, their bodies entwined in a dance of passion, of love, of something so deep it was impossible to put into words. It was more than just desire. It was an unbreakable bond, a connection. So fierce hours later, as the moon shone silver light on their bedroom, it left them breathless, shaking, and lost in each other. Tina lay curled against William's chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns across his skin, his arms around her like a shield, and his warm breath as he held her close. He murmured, "Are you happy?" against her hair, his voice becoming more tender. Tina turned to look at him, and the love she saw there made her heart pound. Happier than I've ever been, she admitted, pressing a gentle kiss to his jaw, a slow. He whispered with a smile that curved his lips and tightened his grip on her. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way. Tina sighed, content, safe, loved, and yet deep. The whisper of sin's call lingered in the recesses of her mind. She didn't want to dwell on an unresolved issue because she didn't want it to taint what she had with William, but she knew the past was never truly gone. It had a way of returning when you least expect it. Despite her desire to believe that Sin's return meant nothing, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. The past was still working on them when Tina felt William's strong arms around her as she awoke. His warmth wrapped her up in a sense of safety she had never experienced before, protecting her. Through the curtains, the early morning light shone golden on his chiseled features and dark lashes. Resting against his sharp cheekbones, his lips slightly parted as he slept. He appeared calm and vulnerable, as if the weight of the past had finally fallen away. Tina extended a hand, tracing a soft touch, somewhere in the night they had shared. Fingertip down his jaw, memorizing every curve of his face, every detail that made him hers. But even as love surged within her, a small knot of unease coiled in her chest. She wanted to believe that the night before had vanquished all ghosts of his past, that the love they had made had sealed them together in a way that nothing, not even sin, could undo. But the way she had seen William tense at Sin's name, the way he had gripped the phone with barely contained rage, told her that some wounds were harder to heal than others, as if sensing her thoughts. William's arms clung to her, drawing her in closer until she was flush against him, and he spoke in a deep voice. "You're thinking too much again, Tina?" A husky from sleep rumbled in her ear, smiled, tilting her head up to meet his half-lighted gaze. "I can't help." She admitted it, while gently brushing his tangled hair with her fingers. William rolled over her before she could finish, securing her beneath him with his dark eyes filled with emotion. Intense, it took her breath away, so he stopped and murmured, brushing her lips in a feather-light touch. "Stop letting her live in your head." "She doesn't matter," Tina never swallowed. But she did look into his eyes for any sign of hesitation, trace of the doubt that had flickered there the night before, but all she saw was certain to be uncompromising and ferocious. "She was a part of your past, William," she whispered, her hands on his exposed chest. "I just don't want that past to enter our relationship." Future William's expression darkened, a storm brewing behind his eyes. "Our future, Tina." "No," he echoed, his voice low enough to be almost dangerous. "No one could touch it." He leaned down and kissed her on the ear. "You are mine and nothing else. Nothing is going to take you away from me." A shiver ran down her spine at them. His tone was possessive, and his grip on her waist seemed to indicate that he needed to remind himself that she was real, that she was here. And God, she loved. She loved him for the way he needed her, and for the way his love for her consumed him. His neck was pulling him down for a slow kiss that quickly turned into something more raw and desperate. William groaned into her mouth, his hands sliding over her body, setting her skin on fire. "You drive me insane," he growled against her lips, his voice strained with barely contained hunger. Every damn time Tina arched beneath him, gasping as she touched him and lost control. As his lips trailed down her neck, his hands leaving a burning path in their wake. "Then don't hold back," she whispered breathlessly. And he didn't. He devoured her, worshipped her, loved her with a passion so intense that it caused her to tremble in his arms. Whisper on her lips, time lost all meaning as they gave themselves to each other again and again until there is no past, only them, tangled in a love so strong and consuming that nothing can separate them. Else existed when the world finally came back into focus. Tina lay curled against. He ran his fingers across William's exhausted but utterly contented chest and body. Lazily up and down her spine, his other hand possessively resting on her hip. "You, Tina," he murmured against her hair. "Are mine. Forever," Tina smiled, pressing a soft kiss against his bare shoulder. "And you're mine," she whispered. But just as the words left her lips, a sharp knock echoed through the penthouse. William stiffened immediately, his expression darkening as he sat up, pulling the sheets around them. Tina's heart pounded as she watched him put on sweatpants and walk. "Stay here," he ordered in a firm voice. Toward the door, a part of her already knew who it was before he even opened it. Sin, she stood there in the doorway, her expression unreadable, her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, flickering between William and the penthouse behind him. Said her voice, smooth, calculated. William's jaw tightened. "There's nothing left to say." "It's not about us, William," Sin sighed, crossing her arms. Pee about something you don't know. Tina sat up in bed, clutching the sheets against her chest as she strained to hear their conversation. I don't want to know, William coldly stated. I've moved on. I'm married, and I love my wife. Saw a flicker of something, but she quickly covered it up. It's about why I left. She said, finally, you deserve to know the truth. William hesitated, and Tina's stomach twisted as he inquired about the truth. Not just betrayal, but also a step closer to sin, William the Fern. I was forced to stay, and I didn't leave because I wanted to. Tina's heart pounded as a result. What did she mean? William's hands curled into fists at his sides. That doesn't change anything. He snapped, you still left. You still broke me. Sin exhaled her. I know she admitted it, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Her gaze softened. But you'll understand that I don't want to understand if you just listen to me. William cut her off. His voice was laced with finality, with a coldness Tina had never heard before. I don't care why you left. I don't care about the past. Tina is my future, Sin. Eyes flickered with something unreadable before she nodded slowly. She murmured, I won't bother you again. However, if you ever wanted to know the truth, you know where to find me. She turned and walked away, leaving William standing in the doorway, his shoulders tense, his fists clenched. Tina sucked hard while she waited for him to turn back to her and reassure her that it didn't matter, that nothing had changed. But when he finally closed the door and looked at her, something in his eyes gave her a chill, a hint of doubt. And in that moment, Tina knew the past wasn't finished with them. Yet Tina sat on the edge of their bed, her heart pounding against her ribs as she watched William silently pace the room, his jaw tight. She couldn't quite identify the emotion that made her muscles tense. It wasn't anger, or was it regret? It was something else, something deeper, something that sent the peace had been shattered by the sudden reappearance of her Sin. Quiet world they had created, despite William's expulsion. Something about her words had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Tina could feel it in the fact that he hadn't touched her since closing the door, in the rigidity of his body, and in the distance of his mind. A lump formed in her throat as she fought the irrational fear creeping into her heart. She felt William's love for her in every kiss, every touch, and every whispered words of love. But the past had a cruel way of getting in the way of the present, and for she was terrified the first time that it might take away the man who had become her entire world. Williams finally slowed down and looked at her with his dark eyes unreadable when they met hers, and he quietly said his voice with something she couldn't quite place. Tina forcefully swallowed. I shouldn't be she to hold his gaze, should I? She said she had to leave you, William, whispering, and even though you drove her away, and I could see that you wanted to learn the truth, William. Abruptly exhaled, ran his irritated hand through his hair, and then crossed the room to kneel before her. He tightened his grip on her hands as he looked up at her, his eyes burning. Intensely, he murmured to Tina, Rar, desperate, you are my truth. This he pressed her hands to his chest. Right over his heart is my truth, whatever Sin must state, that it does not alter my feelings for you or Tina's. She took a deep breath as she looked at his face, wanting to believe and needing to believe. However, a small portion of her, the part that had been harmed by love in the past, was unable to ignore the persistent worry that the truth of Sin might have the power to change everything. Then why do I feel like you're slipping away from me? She whispered, breaking William's grip on her and making his eyes get darker. He growled, pulling, with something fierce and possessive. I'm not sure what it was. Her onto his lap in a single swift motion, his arms encircling her, as if daring her to doubt him. I won't let that happen. As she clung to him, Tina's chest said, The past take me from you? She challenged, her voice shaking with fear and her fingers digging into his bare shoulders as evidence. Desire crowed to me that nothing has changed, and Williams let out a low growl, throat as he cued her face, forcing her to raise her chin to face him. I'll do more than just prove it, he said, murmured darkly before crashing his lips against hers in a kiss, so deep, so consuming, that it stole the breath from Tina, gasped against his mouth, as he carried her up in his arms. With a hunger that sent fire coursing through her veins and her back to the bed, he laid her down, pressing his body into as he kissed a blazing trail down her neck, his lips never leaving her skin, her body arching into his every touch until she was trembling beneath him, her collarbone falling ever so low. "You would think I could ever want anyone else," he said in a thick, raspy voice, as he placed her hands above her head and spoke in his deep voice. "You doubt that Tina's heart could ever rival your burning eyes." Pounded on her head as she shook it, her breath coming out in ragged gasps. But she didn't say that because she was aware deep down that whatever sin had once meant to him was nothing in comparison to what they had, and Williams's lips curled in a contented smirk before he captured her mouth again, his kiss searing, claiming, erasing every last shred of doubt, their bodies tangled together in a storm of passion, a desperate need to remind each other of he revered her and loved her, and what they had was something that no past could ever take away, with a ferocity that left her gasping for air until she had no fear but them alone. Hours later, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, William traced lazy circles. His soft but serious gaze fell on her exposed shoulder. "I need to end this," he murmured. Tina clenched her fists and raised her head to catch William's breath. His jaw tightening, sin the past whatever unfinished business is still lingering. "I need to hear whatever she has to say for the last time," and then close the door. Tina felt a chill run down her spine forever, but she forced herself to nod, saying, "Okay, but promise me." William promised me that no matter what she says, no matter what truth she tries to tell you, it won't change. As he pulled her closer, William's grip on her tightened. His lips were pressing. He vowed against her forehead, "You, Tina, are that nothing can change us. Future and nothing, not even the past, can separate us." Tina shut her eyes, allowing his words sink into her soul, and for the first time since sin had reappeared, she believed him, but she was unaware that the truth was waiting for them, would be a far more shocking event than either of them had ever anticipated. Tina stood by the window of their bedroom, her fingers gripping the sheer curtain as she watched the city's skyline glisten under the night sky. Her heart was a storm of emotions. Love, fear, William had left her, and all of her hope collapsed into an unbearable weight in her chest. Earlier to meet sin was determined to end the past once and for all, just as he had promised her that nothing would change, that their love was stronger than anything his ex could say, but his eyes still showed an unease about her soul, had dimmed before he left, and the tension in his jaw told her that this meeting was about more than just getting to know each other. Confronting the ghost that had haunted him for so long, and a part of her feared that it wouldn't be as easy to close once that door was opened. Tina clenched her hands into a painfully slow motion that lasted for an eternity, clenching their fists in an effort to put an end to the thoughts that had been torturing her. "You, nothing will change," but doubt was a cruel thing. She cried out in fear. What if sin's words held more weight than she expected? What if? William's heart wavered even for a moment. The thought of losing him was unbearable. She had fought too hard, loved too deeply to have it all slip through her fingers now. Just as she was drowning in her thoughts, the sound of her breathing became labored as the front door opened, and her heart raced wildly as she fixed her attention on William as he entered, still dressed, in his tailored black suit, but his tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, his face was unreadable, his expression carved in stone. Tina's stomach twisted. She asked in a barely audible whisper, "What did she say?" Didn't respond right away. Instead, he took measured, slow steps toward her, his dark eyes locked onto hers when he reached her. He set her face in his hands, his touch gentle yet firm. "It doesn't matter," he murmured. Tina searched his gaze, trying to decipher the storm raging beneath his calm exterior. "It does matter, William." I need to know. His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't tell her, but after that he deeply exhaled while rubbing her cheek with his thumb. He was compelled to leave, he admitted. Lo, her family threatened her. They made her choose between me and them, and she, Tina's breath caught, and William shook his head. But nothing has changed. She continued to leave, breaking me despite everything he said. And more than that, tonight, Realizing something, he slightly tightened his grip on her face. "She didn't fight for me like you did, Tina," with her eyes burning into hers. Tina's eyes welled up with tears as the weight of his words weighed on her. Settled deep in her heart, "William, I love you," he murmured, pressing. "I love you so much that it scares me to death," his forehead against hers. Tina let out a shaky breath as she realized that no one could ever make her love me. As she buried her face in his chest and wrapped her arms around his neck, she felt relief, smashed into her like waves, washing away every ounce of doubt. "Afraid that she still had a place in your life," she admitted, her voice muffled by his shirt. As he turned her face upward, Hart Williams's hands became tangled in her hair. His promise to her was that you would own every part of me, Tina, including my heart and soul. Tina cried softly throughout her entire existence, but not out of sadness. Was from the overwhelming love that consumed her, and William captured her before she could say another word. Lips in a kiss that was so raw and deep that it made her breathless, and his hand slipped down. His lips devoured hers and claimed her as her back pulled her inexorably closer. "In the way only he could, I need you," he rasped against her mouth. "Right now, I need to feel you, Tina." Tina's body ignited at his words, at the way his voice was laced with desperation, hunger, love she didn't need. It would appear that all she did was respond, her fingers slipping under his shirt and her touch smoldering against his. "Skin, William," she whispered. "Make me yours once more." And a low growl erupted in his chest as he took her in his arms and hurriedly carried her toward the bed, sending chills down her spine. He laid her down gently, but the moment their bodies met, there was nothing gentle about the way he kissed her, the way he touched her. It was raw, unrestrained, filled with the kind of passion that only two souls who belonged to each other could share. Tina gasped as William's lips. His hands traced every inch of her body as they traveled down her neck, as if memorizing her once more. "Each time I touch you," he whispered, his breath hot against her skin, "I fall even more in love with you." Tina arched. As he wooed her with such fervor that she trembled beneath him, her nails were digging into his back. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, and their hearts beat as one. Their love was stronger than anything they had ever experienced. Tried to break them, and in that moment, as their souls intertwined, there was no sin, has no doubts, no worries, only ours. Later, as they lay, tangled in each other's arms, Tina traced lazy circles on William's chest, her head resting against him as she listened to his steady heartbeat. "I never thought I'd find this," she admitted softly, "a love so deep, so unbreakable." William kissed the top of his tightening arms around her. "Did not include me, but you did. Changed everything, Tina, and you restored my faith in love." Tina smiled, raising her head to meet his gaze. "And you made me believe that sometimes love is worth the risk." William CED her face. His eyes filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It's always worth the risk," he said. "Especially when it's you." Tina felt her heart beat faster as she leaned forward. In their lips, meeting in a kiss that was soft, lingering, full of promises that she did not require any words. And as they held hands, she was unaware of any past or betrayal. Because their love was more powerful than anything that fate had thrown at them, no ghost of the past could ever stand in their way. Their method, which has always been